Compañeros! Welcome. Ooh, if I can just scoot over now. I'm a little cut off. Welcome to another edition of the Cinco Theater Partners podcast.
Yeah.
We are back. I feel like it's been a little while, right? Mostly my fault, and so I appreciate everyone's patience, including my cohorts, Mr. Kevin Fiesel.
Hello.
And Mr. Eugene Meininger.
Hey, everybody.
So today, we have several announcements to make. The first of which is that Sequel Trail is now live. So we're going to be having another Sequel Trail event June 15th. So coming up in just 3 weeks. Wow, not too much longer. So Sequel Trail,
Nice.
June 15th.
Is there any bumper music for Sequel Trail?
Bumper music.
Well,
Not
it doesn't have
rave
to be,
music.
It doesn't have to be a dance music. Just a little
a little
bumper.
intro, like a little radio intro.
Yeah, exactly. The
Coming to
Sequel
Sequel
Trail
Trail.
update.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, there we go. Let's see. That button.
Get Amanda on it.
You didn't get programmed, you know. Yeah.
You don't have your stream deck set up yet for that. I mean, Kevin's all about streaming. He can teach you how to use it, I'm sure.
Yes, that's right. That'll be our next episode, right? On how to use the stream deck.
This is why we have pre-meetings, people.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Although you don't want to just jump right into the pre-meeting. That'd be scary.
That's a little. Yeah, we have to send that to the lawyers. That's why it takes so long sometimes to get these episodes out. So we have 3 speakers, right? We've got Deepthi Gorugi. I said that wrong. Gorui. She's talking about the fundamentals of Query Store. John Kursky bringing data ops to Power BI with Azure DevOps, DAX Studio, and PowerShell. And then Chris Seferlis is from Microsoft, and he's going to be talking about Azure Synapse, right? Azure Synapse and data workloads. So that's our lineup. We're going to continue to use AirMeet. We got good feedback on that last time. And we're also adding more space in between the sessions. So there'll be a little more time for chatting, meet and greet between the sessions. So yeah, sequeltrail.com. If you want to go take a peek, it's free. We hope you'll register, and we'll see you there. I can also tell you that the next couple episodes we're excited to have some guests with us.
Yeah.
So that'll be good, right? More than our smiling faces or voices, right? To accompany you, however you get your podcast. But today we want to talk a little bit about, or we have some thoughts on dashboard design principles. And obviously, right, we as I drink from my Microsoft Kool-Aid, once again, right, we're very Microsoft centric there. So, I'll always take that in consideration. Although that is part of the reason why we have Kevin, is because Kevin can provide that, peanut gallery perspective for the rest of us.
I am both Statler and Waldorf.
So handy, this guy. Okay, but as always, before I do that, I do have a couple of shout outs that I want to give, and let's do that over here. We want to give a shout out to Matthew Nowicki, Kevin Chant, Fabricio Vaz, Clayson Casio, Edgar A. Cano, Sushmita Biswa, David Stokes, Sacha Dittman. And again, compañeros, you'll forgive me if I didn't get your name quite right. We still enjoy having you. Thanks for giving us a little shout out. We appreciate it for engaging with us. And we hope that you find the content helpful. Okay, so let's see. I think that is all of the announcements. Oh, do we need to play Where in the World is Kevin Fiesel today?
I've been in my house for a while.
Okay.
I haven't been going anywhere lately.
Haven't been going anywhere. We're still a little bit homebound, huh? No, I guess I was referring to your picture.
Oh, that I have no idea where that is. I just grabbed these off of Unsplash, and
Nice.
they work pretty well.
There you go. Very good. Okay, so today, dashboard design principles. Oh, let's see. And I should. So T Barnstormer, right? Excited about SQL Trail. So thanks for letting us know. If
It's excited for you.
I'm sorry.
I said SQL Trail is excited for you as well.
SQL Trail. Okay, so database design principles, and this is one of those. I don't know, maybe funny topics, in the sense that
I'm gonna have to cut you off because it's what I do.
Oh, yeah.
Database design is what you said.
It's dead, huh?
No.
You said database design.
Oh, did I say? Oh, I'm sorry. Dashboard design principles, right? So it's one of those things that is, you go to an event, you get your hands on a demo or something, and you're like, oh, I want to replicate that, right? It looks really cool. And the first thing you start doing is you start splashing a whole bunch of, well, not you, compañeros, right? This is me, the knuckle dragging Neanderthals, right? They get the Power
Sure.
BI and they start dragging the visualizations onto the screen, and they're like, I want one of those, and I want one of those, and oh, look over here. Now, Kevin did mention pie charts that are not good, so I won't put a pie chart, but let me put this other kind of chart. And we got zigzags, and the next thing you know, it's like, what are we looking at here? Now, if you're into abstract art, right, it's right up your alley. But for the rest of us mere mortals, we tend to go awry. It doesn't quite work for us, right? So I think what we wanted to do today was talk or share some ideas on how we could approach this a little bit better.
Sure. First thing I got to say is worse than pie charts are donut charts, because donut charts are pie charts that are unwilling to commit. So don't use donut charts.
Don't do it.
Also, don't use pie charts.
Any kind of food-based chart is just not recommended.
Food and
I
visualization.
have to think about that.
Yeah, right.
There might be an exception.
Right, like a French fry chart would be a bar chart, so that would probably be fine.
It'd be a very awkward looking bar chart
Yeah, it'd
where all
be
the
wavy.
bars are splayed.
Yep.
So
All right.
if we're talking dashboards,
Yeah.
the thing that I will lay out as what you want to keep in mind there are a couple of things. The first is understand that a dashboard is intended to be a single pane of glass. You're not generally supposed to be clicking, dragging, scrolling, zooming, unzooming, diving into, or otherwise operating this dashboard on a general basis. There are scenarios in which you can, and there are scenarios in which this is the intent. Power BI pushes that with, for example, cross-filtering of visuals. If I click on this bar chart, then it will change these numbers. And that's okay. That is optional and also fairly easy and intuitive. So that's it's not an exception, but it's that throat-clearing clarification where like the 100 level course tells you do not do X, and the 300 level course says do X in these specific circumstances. Right. But otherwise, treat it like it's a single pane of glass, because you don't necessarily know the medium in which the dashboard is displayed. It could be on a big television where people don't have ready access to control a keyboard or a mouse. It could be on somebody's phone where the only controls I really have access to are my fingers as I'm jamming at the screen.
Sure.
So the more you can do,
that's gaining popularity. I should note, right? So I know we've had some customers do it with SSRS reports, like on the shop floor. But now there's actually a product, and I'll pull it up here in a second. But so you plug it. It's almost like a, like
Like a digital signage product or what?
Yeah, so you plug it in like you would your
Like a Roku or
your
something,
your
but-
Roku or your Fire your Fire Stick or whatever, and then you can cast directly from Power BI to it.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Right, it will pick up, and so it will just display the report. So it takes care of moving or going from report to report for you, and so you can display them fairly straightforward, right?
Yeah, and I've seen development teams where you'll just have a big screen TV and a little computer, maybe a Raspberry Pi or something, that just shows browser tabs and switches between tabs every 30 seconds or so. And in those scenarios, sure, there's a keyboard and a mouse, but do you want to be the person walking up to the keyboard and mouse constantly to drill into something? Not really. It's ideally something that is just there where you can look at it. And that gets to the second point, that the key performance indicators are obvious. So in other words, what are the things that I, as a user of your dashboard, need to know? And you should show them to me in a way that I can easily and briefly understand what it is that I'm supposed to know. So if this is a sales pipeline visual or a dashboard, I may have a funnel style visual that shows each level of the pipeline, the number of customers, the expected value of these customers. Through the different pipelines, I may have estimations of how long it'll take to get through the pipeline, and some calculations of, for example, expected value of the pipeline today and what that might look like historically. So if those are specific things that I need to watch out for, then I can see that on your dashboard very quickly. The more things you throw onto the dashboard, the harder it is for me to figure out what I'm supposed to be looking at. If you have 20 separate visuals on a single dashboard, I don't know where to start looking, and my eyes they flit around. They try to latch onto something that seems interesting, but it's almost like you're at an amusement park and there's just so many bright, shiny things all trying to get your attention at once, and you end up being rattled as a result of it. On that dashboard, somebody gets rattled like that, they just say, well, this is too tough, and just stop using it.
Right. And I would say that's probably, now there are other reasons why folks engage us, but generally speaking, if they've already started with, like, again, with Power BI, they reached out to us because they're like, our IT folks have created this report, but nobody knows what it does, right? Like,
Yep. That is a classic disconnect where the IT people will say, I know how to get these numbers really easily, so let me throw those numbers on the dashboard.
Right.
And they don't make sense for the user. But the user often has a difficult time articulating what does make sense. And this is where, if you're a database developer, if you're a data architect, especially if you're a data architect, but any sort of database developer or business intelligence person, you really have to understand the domain of your industry and your company. You can be a DBA who has the mindset of, I don't care what it is the company does, because my job is sort of orthogonal to the operations of the company. I make sure backups and restores are working, work with indexes. I may make sure that machines are up and running. I'm purely administrative. And you can kind of get away with that, but even then, I think it's still better to understand the domain. As you're getting into development work, reporting work, you absolutely have to understand, what is it these people do? What is it they're looking for? And how can you provide that information to them in a reasonable manner? Sure. And that's not something that you can intuit necessarily. That's not something that you're going to deduce by sitting in your dark corner thinking about what it is that the ideal customer will need. It's going to involve working with people. It's going to involve pulling teeth sometimes, because half the time they don't know what they need.
Yeah, a little trial and error. We run into that all the time, don't we, Eugene?
Yeah, it was. Well, it's funny what you said about, okay, it's easy for me to get this data. That reminds me of the joke where like this drunk person is trying to find their car keys and they're looking under a lamppost, and you're like, oh, well, let me help you. Where did you lose them? It's like, oh, I lost them by my car. It's like, well, then why are you over here? It's like, well, the light's better here. It's easier to see here.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yep, we do that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of that. And it's funny, we did work for a customer that was obsessed with Stephen Few. And so I like read some of that stuff for that job we did. And one of the things I learned is Power BI was not good at sparklines at the time. I learned that the hard way. But one of the other things was the Stephen Few books gave me a vernacular for talking about dashboards, because so much of what they're about is situational awareness. You know, and I think the example he used was more in a military sense, like if you're in a fighter jet. But even if you drive a car, like you want to have those side mirrors so you can check to make sure you're not going to hit somebody when you change lanes, right? And that really helps me.
That's what the side mirrors are for, by the way.
Oh.
So if you drive, I recommend keeping that in mind. Like, oh, that's what these things are for.
Public service announcements,
So I
Secret
don't
partners.
run into
If you learn nothing else today, compañeros.
Well, it was funny. When I was learning how to drive, we actually got like the little circular, like hyperbolic ones you would snap on, so I had even better field of view. But that was really helpful for me to be like, oh, this is kind of like a drumbeat kind of report. Like I'm gonna check it every morning to make sure that my situation hasn't changed, that I have some awareness. And then that's very different than the power users I'm used to dealing with, where it's like, no, they want to dig in, they want to explore, they want to click around. And so, like you said, you can make reports that meet both of those needs. But it really is two different modalities when you're dealing with your users and what they're doing with the content.
Yeah, for sure. And understanding what the goal is critical. And then once you kind of have that goal, you've got these indicators, these things that people need to know about, and you get a feeling for how frequently they need to use it. So if this is something that I look at, I grab my coffee, I look at this thing in the morning, maybe it tells me I need to spend some time on this problem. Oh, this customer's having issues, so let me go call them proactively. And give you that situational understanding. But then there may be other times when, okay, we've had a problem. I need to diagnose what has happened. And that's where dashboards are a bit less helpful. And you get more into classical reporting or into data analysis, which a lot of people try to slap onto a dashboard. So if you spend a lot of time drilling into dashboards, there's a really good chance that this should not be in a dashboard. That's the wrong tool for the job.
Right.
Next thing I would hit on is, okay, you've got these key performance indicators, and keep the ones that should be together. So what I mean is, if these are logically very similar measures, put them in a place where they're close to each other, physically proximate to one another. And what that does is it means that if I'm looking for revenue measures, I see revenue, and maybe I also want to see cost, and then I want to see profit, and I might want to see a couple of other accounting measures. Ideally, you see these things in relatively close to each other, relatively lined up with one another, and not splayed all across your dashboard where revenue's up here and then cost is way over there and then profit is like over here someplace, and causing people to, again, bounce their eyes around. You start bouncing your eyes around, pretty soon you give up.
Yeah. So there's a book that I 100% recommend that has to do with web usability called "Don't Make Me Think" by Steve Krug. And
really good one.
I need to read the latest version. I read the second edition. But what blew my mind was the fact that they did eye track studies. They would put this big piece of machinery on your face and see where you were looking at the website. And it turns out that people do not read your website like a novel, right? They're jumping around, they're scanning, they're all over the place. And that has so much influenced my blog writing because I make sure that I have headers, I have bold words, I have this stuff to make it scannable. And you want to make sure that your reporting content is also scannable. And that's going to come in a lot of ways with like use of color, use of white space. Like you said, having it in a logical order because, you know, unless you speak, Arabic or Hebrew,
where you're right to left.
Exactly. Unless you speak one of those languages, you're going to be used to reading from top to bottom and left to right. And so what's ideal is making a flow that supports that. And you really want to think about that ahead of time.
Yeah. So jumping off of those points, they were such good points. And
no, there's not enough to jump off of. It was a very small pier.
There's so much to jump off of, but then I forgot the beginning point where I was going to say, this jumps actually right into what I was going to talk about with the different types of layouts, where Eugene was mentioning, here's how I've laid out my blog posts. And Krug summarizes some stuff. There are historically, I would say, 3 major concepts of how things are laid out. The first one was the Gutenberg layout. And the idea is, again, focusing on people who are familiar with, say, Western European languages, English, Spanish, French, Italian, along those lines, German or the Scandinavian languages, which are left to right, top to bottom.
Right.
Hopefully that showed up as left to right, top to bottom as I dragged over, because I don't know how many reverses Zoom does, but assume that was left to right, top to bottom. So Gutenberg layout says that if I want you to read this stuff, I should put it somewhere top left, and then people's eyes just kind of glaze down until the bottom. So you're interested at the start, you're interested at the end, you're not so interested in the rest of it. And really, if you wanted to hide bad news, you put it kind of down in this bottom left corner because people don't look down there. Then there's a second layout called the Z layout. So again, you start top to left and you are consistent across the top, but then you real quickly get bored. And so you scan down to the bottom where you read the very bottom. And now I'm an expert because I've read the top and the bottom.
Sure.
So now you put the bad news kind of in the middle, where people don't read it.
That's funny.
Now, the third example is Jacob Nielsen, who came up with the F layout, where this was taking college students and having them read Washington Post online articles. And what would happen is that they would start reading, kind of get bored, and they're reading less and less per line, and now they're just kind of scanning down the line until you get to the end, and they don't even read the end. So
man, the pictures for this are amazing. Definitely Google Jacob Nielsen and F layout. Like it's amazing to see the actual heat map for it. My goodness.
Oh, absolutely. But one of the real interesting things there is that if you have some sort of image or something that breaks the monotony, then you reset people's brains and now they read across again. So this is part of why a while back, you may remember that the Post started putting a lot of advertisements every few paragraphs.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't just to jam up the number of impression counts. It was actually to reset people's brains so that they would read again. Now, all 3 of those are real interesting, and they've got great stories around them. But the thing is, all of them are related to reading blocks of text. Gutenberg and Z layout are essays, articles, books. F layout was text articles for newspaper. None of them are about visual heavy dashboards. And so those layouts, although very interesting and you can learn from them, probably don't apply as well as you'd think to dashboards. And what I like is a different concept called focal points, where the idea is the things that are most interesting, the things that are going to be the most important for an end user, I want to make largest, most colorful, and you will naturally draw your eyes toward those things. So if I have a dashboard I'm not going to have a huge number of colors to begin with, and I'm sure we'll talk about that as we get through here. But if there's something where I really want to draw your attention, I'm going to use color on that. Or I'll make it a larger visual than some of the rest of them, because you're going to see that large visual. You're not going to see the block of text. And, or rather, it will be a lot harder to see the block of text. And for focal points, the best example I have is, a lot of people have seen this video, but it's the count how many dribbles of the basketball there are. And this was a psychology experiment video where they would bring people in and say, okay, count how many times this team passes the ball. And you have a team of high schoolers, they're passing the ball between each other. And you're supposed to keep track. How many passes? And in the middle of it, a man in a gorilla suit walks in and does a little dance and then walks off. And it turns out that a surprisingly large percentage of people never noticed the guy in the gorilla suit because they were hyper focused on how many passes. So Eugene apparently did not notice the guy in the gorilla suit.
No, I did not. I think this happened to me in college. The video might be that old, but I was one of the people that did not catch the gorilla.
Yeah, and that's a man who he was walking right behind him. It was only like 3 feet behind him, so it wasn't out in the corner where he just pokes in. He was out there doing a little dance and everything, and he was out there for several seconds. And yet, Eugene is not alone by any means. There's a large percentage of people who just didn't see him at all. So similarly, on a dashboard, you have things that draw attention. You have things that a lot of people just won't notice. And you can point it out and they'll say, oh, wow, I never saw that before. Yes, you've been using this dashboard for 9 months. You've never seen it before.
Well, you know, it's funny. That idea, one of the things that I have noticed, and I'm not sure if a trend is the right word, but because, and maybe it's just our projects, right? But people are going from Excel into Power BI a lot of times, right? There's that need, right? It's like a, almost like a physical need, like that I have to get my data into Excel. And one of the common things that I'll see is, or that I'll hear, or I guess that I see now, is that there's a row of visualization, and then there'll be a row of text. And if people don't see the text, they're like, where's my text? Where's my text? Right? They can't appreciate it because they're like, how do I get this out into Excel? And so this gets into a type of dashboard that kind of sort of may not exist depending on who you ask. So there's two major classes of dashboards: strategic and operational. Strategic being high level, I'm going to look at measures like revenue and cost, things that are typically long-term, refreshed quarterly or monthly. Operational tend to be very low level, focused on specific measures to help line operators do their jobs. And they tend to be updated much closer to real time. Tactical dashboards are ones that use strategic data, but they expose the data in a way that's more like an operational dashboard. They will show you more information and allow for more clicking, dragging, drilling, sorting, operating than a strategic dashboard should. A classic strategic dashboard is one that you can show on a television during a meeting and not need to click on. An operational dashboard is something that I'm much more okay with clicking, scrolling, dragging, and moving, because generally this is going to be a person at a desk, often with a large screen monitor, where they need to get specific information and might need more than what you would normally put onto a strategic dashboard. Right.
So I describe a tactical dashboard as Excel methadone, where you've got that one person who wants Excel. Just give me the data in Excel. It's like, okay, let's wean you off of Excel just a little bit here and try it out in here. Realize that all you're going to do is create a pivot table of this data. So let me pivot it for you. Over time, we're going to figure out what things, what charts, what visuals, what indicators you really need. And we'll give you that so that you don't have to spend 30 minutes each week doing it to the same Excel spreadsheet.
Yep. And that I think is, dare I say, a good use case, right? Is find the repetitive things that people are doing, show them the end result, but give them a way to get back to their data, and you're probably that's a pretty good first pass, right?
For sure, yeah.
And then you can go from there, right?
Yep.
And add the things like, I guess the sky's the limit at that point, right? But and then as they get more comfortable, one with the tooling, right, with the visualization, right, with the I believe your numbers, right? Then they'll they may let go of that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, yeah, that's interesting.
Right. Yeah, and as you're defining that stuff, designing it out, doing all this work, since Eugene's mentioned Stephen Few a few times, I want you to keep in mind a quotation of his that I absolutely love. Dashboards are not an appropriate venue for artistic impression. And the point of that is, look, you can create something that is aesthetically beautiful, but is completely unhelpful and nobody will use it. You can create something that is ugly and people will use it because it is helpful to them.
Yep.
Ideally, you create neither of those. You create something which is appropriate in terms of aesthetics, can be pleasing, but your job is not to craft a masterpiece. Your job is to get information into the eyeballs and brains of people who need that information in the most effective, efficient manner. And keeping that in mind over the I want to unleash my creative potential is important, because you're not going to be displaying this in the Louvre. You're going to be displaying this in the boardroom. And those people just won't understand your creative genius.
Yeah, now in fairness, right, so there could be some out there that are like, but and this is coming from the Microsoft, right, Power BI blog, and which, again, if you go to powerbi.com, it's all about like the visualization, right, and how fancy it could be, right? So this is a pull back the curtain a little bit, and this is Jen Underwood and Jamie Foxx, right? But they say, don't get caught up in the pizzazz, razzle, and dazzle of any data visualization just because it is slick, colorful, or you just happen to like the way it looks. So, unfortunately, people are adopting it from that way because they want to see spark lines, right? Or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, so this is, I suppose, my follow-on to it. It's not strictly a response. The follow-on is that I will take a very utilitarian approach to visualization, to dashboards, because that's the purpose. The dashboard is there to be used. It is there for the recipients, for the consumers, to be able to glean information from it and make decisions that drive something forward. And that is your goal as a dashboard designer. It is your goal as a report writer. It is a lot of what we do in any sort of IT endeavor is to help other people make better decisions and to give them the tools in the way that they can easily understand and comprehend and act upon what they're doing. And we do sometimes lose sight of that, where we'll focus again on Eugene's drunk under the lamp. We're going to look for what is easy for us,
right,
versus what is useful for the people who are using our products. So much like Seneca, however, I should note that the virtues don't necessarily indicate that you can't be aesthetically pleasing. So I just flipped this completely into an en passant discussion of Stoic philosophy. So let's get into that.
Oh boy.
You have those cardinal virtues, and if you follow those virtues, it doesn't mean that everything else is, strictly speaking, completely irrelevant, but that it is okay if you also have this non-cardinal virtue, so long as you have these. So bringing this back to dashboards, if your dashboard is useful, then I'm not saying make it ugly. I'm not saying that an ugly dashboard is equal to an aesthetically pleasing dashboard. What I'm saying is solve problem 1 first. Make this useful. Once this is useful, we solve problem 2. Make this aesthetically pleasing. Or maybe that's problem 3 or 4. It's not problem number 1. It's not supposed to be the prettiest dashboard. This isn't a state fair where you rate based on how pretty the dashboard is.
Yeah, nobody's going to give you a blue ribbon for your dashboard.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's also not saying there is no value to something aesthetically pleasing. There is value to it. And so keep that in mind, but a little further back in mind.
Sure. And I mean, what's also challenging, I think, from the IT side is that if your marketing friends can help you a lot with that, just by following some of their branding guides, you can go a long way that way. And I know you mentioned kind of getting into colors and whatnot, right? I would almost argue that it's not. Do I want to say that? It's not your job. Well, yeah, not your job necessarily, right? To come up with a way to make it look good. You can get help with that. Is that fair?
If your marketing people are good at it.
If your marketing people are good at it. Right?
I mean, your marketing people could also be terrible.
But at least you have an out because your stuff will look like everything else, right? So at least you'll be consistent. Oh, man.
Let's talk a little bit about color since we haven't yet. And it's a really important thing. There is a book, Storytelling with Data, by Cole Nussbaumer Knaflic. Unfortunately, don't have a physical copy of it, so I can't show you the physical copy. But go out and buy a copy. This book is outstanding. And one of the things that she lays out is you don't really need color. In fact, color often detracts from the quality of a visual. Because if I show you a bar chart in Power BI, historically, the bars would have been different colors. I've noticed that with clustered bar charts today, they now no longer have, they focus on, they have one color by default.
Right. Yep.
That was a change. Previously, it was, they had a palette of colors, 8 to 10 colors, and you would rotate between them. And what would happen is that the colors would be arbitrarily selected, but you can look at that data and assume that, well, these 2 bars are black, these 2 bars are green. So how are they related versus these? And the answer was they're not actually related. It just happens to be this was the number of colors in the palette and you had more bars than that. And taking out that color removes 0 information, but it removes confusion. So it is a net improvement. Also, by adding, let's say that you want to focus on a single bar. You're telling a story about this customer who is an outlier, and you want to focus on that customer. Well, you can highlight their bar with a color. Color is one of these things that are called pre-attentive attributes. What that means is your brain will recognize it before you do. You will subconsciously understand what this is before you consciously appreciate that it exists. So the fact that there are all of these bars that are just, let's say they're white, and you have one bar that's red, or one bar that's black, or one bar that's some contrasting color, you immediately see that bar. The other bars merge together. As part of Gestalt psychology, we see things that are similar in terms of shape, size, coloration, and pattern as the same. So you'll see those and say, oh, well, these are all the same. This one's different. And you don't have to mentally think about that. It's just there. So you see this thing that's different, and I don't have to point out, well, here's customer X, and notice how they're 84% larger than the next customer. Or, in this case, customer X is actually in the midpoint of these customers. But then if you go over to the next visual, they're way different. And you can do that without needing to highlight or point at. So if you don't have a bunch of colors, adding a single color makes a lot of sense. If you have a bunch of colors, you now have to find another way of indicating, and it's visual noise. And again, it puts you closer to that edge where you just have visual overload and give up.
Right.
Well, and I don't think you mentioned it, or I might have missed it, but you also have to contend with the fact that I think like 10%, 8 to 12% of males are red-green colorblind, something like that. A huge number. It's like an eighth.
So yeah, actually, yes. Color vision deficiency, really important. I have not mentioned that yet,
That
but I
takes
should
us all
mention
the
that.
way back to episode 83 with Jonathan Stewart, which I haven't talked to in a while. But,
Yep.
I assume he's still alive.
Oh, he's still alive. He's still kicking.
Good.
So color vision deficiency, it's 8% of men, 1/2 of 1% of women, and broken up into 3 major categories. In your eyes, you have cones, and three different cones that are better at picking up specific wavelengths. So what we call red cones are good at picking up a certain set of colors that, if you think about your Roy G. Biv, that cover like that red, orange, yellow, and kind of get into green. You have other cones that start in that orange, yellow, green, blue, and kind of fade off at indigo. And you have a third set of cones that kind of starts nearer to blue, indigo, violet. And so there's a fair amount of overlap between what we call the red cones and the green cones. And there's not as much overlap with those blue cones. So normal human eyes, you're able to pick up all 3, and the combination of the 3 works out pretty well. We are highly attuned to picking out the color green because think of grasses, think of trees, leaves. Most plants have green leaves, so it makes sense for a human to be really good at distinguishing green from not green because, hey, there's a lion or a cheetah hiding behind those trees. And that not green, I can see very easily contrasted with the green. So what happens, though, when one of those sets of cones is relatively weaker than a normal eye? In that case, it's harder to see, it's harder to interpret that wavelength or that set of wavelengths. And that's where we get to something called protanomaly or deuteranomaly or tritanomaly. Weak cones. So prota 1, deutera 2, trita 3, and that's red, green, blue in order. That affects protanomaly about 1% of men, deuteranomaly 5% of men, and tritanomaly is rare. It's probably about, I'd probably say about like 0.4% of women and very rare in men. Next up, you go one step further. What happens if you don't have the cones in your eyes? That's where you get to the nopias. Your cones nope out. So protanopia, no red cones, 1% of men. Deuteranopia, no green cones, 1% of men. Tritanopia, no blue cones, something like 0.1% of women, very, very rare in men. But if you have protanomaly, protanopia, deuteranomaly, deuteranopia, you have trouble distinguishing in that red, orange, yellow, green set of wavelengths. And things start blurring together where I see this color and this color, so these two hues look very similar to the point where my eyes can't distinguish them. If you are, say, deuteranomalous or deuteranopic. And this was particularly something obvious for data platform people. If you look at Integration Services 2008, that was back when they would color the squares, the rectangle elements, red, yellow, and green. So yellow, it's in progress, green, it succeeded, red, it failed. If you were deuteranopic or protanopic, it was really difficult to distinguish success and failure. You could, if you looked real closely, you could actually see that, a deuteranopic or a protanopic person can tell. It's a slight, one looks kind of orangish brown, the other looks closer to yellowish brown. But looking at that at a glance, kind of hard to tell. And that's why in Integration Services 2012, they decided to make it so that nobody could tell if it succeeded or failed.
No information for you.
Well, they made it all one color, which was okay, but they had this little tiny, if I remember, it was like a little tiny purple X or check mark that was really small in the top corner and was real difficult to see.
Right.
And that was your visual indicator. Then in later versions of Integration Services, it changed to where, yeah, it is colorized, but it's a very obvious X versus check, so that even if you don't have the color hint, you can still see X and check.
Right.
And that's one of the things that you can do, by the way, is if you're not using colors, you can use other signals to indicate good, bad, success, failure. And that's where you get into things like, a bar chart works really well because the size of the bar gives you a visual indicator of the level, how far, how near something is to another.
To another, right.
If you're talking success and failure, icons can be helpful in that regard. There are other simpler ways of doing it, but that's one option available to you.
Yeah.
And also, I don't want to put people off of using colors at all, because if you use colors that are easily visible for people who are any of the color vision deficiencies that I mentioned, or even people who are monochromatic, they don't have functioning cones. In that case, those are extremely rare, but there are people who don't have functioning cones. And in that case, if you use colors that look different in black and white, then it'll be fine. If you have colors that look different to people of all with these different levels of color vision deficiency, it'll be fine. And this is important because I guarantee that at least one person in this audience listening to the podcast, I don't know about the in-studio audience.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would make that guarantee, but extend it to the listening audience. I guarantee that at least one of you has a boss or a second level boss or somebody high up in an organization who is red-green colorblind, who is deuteranopic or deuteranomalous or protanopic. I guarantee you at least one of you has somebody like that. And you probably don't know because that's not something that people will go out and tell you, oh yeah, I have deuteranomia.
Right.
By the way, yeah.
There are some people, actually, there are people in the SQL community who are willing to talk about it, and I'm not going to name anybody. People know some of these people, but I don't want to call them out, even though they have publicly talked about, hey,
You don't
I
want to
can't
cone
see.
shame? Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, exactly. No, so I don't want to call it out, but basically, there are people who will have difficulty with this, and so the last thing that you'd want to do is embarrass your third step up boss, because this report, he can't understand why you're talking about the two different things because he only sees one thing.
Sure. Again, all the more reason in my mind to make friends with your marketing department. But that.
Assuming they know.
Well, that's right. I think it's. Well, I don't know, but perhaps it's fair, right? It's like, look, division of labor, right? Here, this is my responsibility.
I mean, they should. That's something that they should know.
Yeah.
And I would say pretty much any good marketing person understands a lot of this.
There you go. Okay. Well, let's see. I feel like we hit. Well, I shouldn't say all the points. I'm pretty sure Kevin has a couple more points that he may want to go on the checklist on, but I think we've hit the highlights.
Yeah.
So I guess so. Last call or last thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is understand that you have different types of audiences when you're dealing with reports, and understand that there are design principles that you don't have to be inborn audience, or not audience, and a native born artist or some sort of research scientist to learn. There's books out there that are approachable, and you can learn a lot of these principles and apply them fairly easily.
Absolutely. Completely agree on that. And I'm about as far from an artist as possible. But there are people who will help you come at it. Like if you are like me, and I don't want the artistic creative explanation, I want the psychology, I want the logic, the science.
Right.
And that's how I'm going to understand this. There are places where you can learn that. If you have the natural creative flair, there are people who are really good at explaining it from, okay, understand here is what looks nice, and let me talk to you about why it looks nice and get into it. I think that's where, for example, Edward Tufte fits in really well, that he will find something that is aesthetically pleasing and will help you understand why it's aesthetically pleasing while also being useful. And
that book is only right. How thick is that book, Kevin? You don't happen to have it handy, do you?
I think he has multiple books together in one box, actually.
Oh, is that which version?
I've got 4 of them.
Oh, there you go. One of them's hitting your green screen real hard.
Yeah.
Yep, beautiful evidence. It's a very green book.
Hey.
But there are authors who will hit this from different angles. And if you want a lot more in-depth info, or at least a little more in-depth info, I had delivered a presentation specifically on dashboard design for SQLBits and also for Data Relay. So the SQLBits presentation I know is available, and there's going to be on, I think, July 22nd, there's going to be another airing of it where I'll be in the audience answering questions. Check that out. That's at least an hour of content. And I think I have versions elsewhere that might be up to 90 minutes long.
There you go. Very cool. So you'll forgive me for sidetracking here for a second. So I know SQLBits, obviously they had a punt, right, last year. Did they have it this year? I didn't even check.
They did a virtual edition last year.
Right.
And we'll see what happens this year. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Data Relay, similarly, they had a virtual edition this year. And don't know what they'll do later on, but we'll see.
So I did notice that even, well, I guess it's not Microsoft per se, but the SQL intersection, not SQL intersection. Kimberly Tripp and what's her name? Like the dev intersection. Yeah, is it?
Yeah, the SQL intersection.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
So they're actually going to have a hybrid event in next month, I think.
Yep, I believe that's in Orlando. And
Yeah. It blows my mind that conferences are happening in person again. I mean, we'll see how that goes. But I was kind of shocked when I saw that. Like, yeah, Orlando, it's happening in June.
Yeah, what is it? So it's not the Dynamics. What is it? But it's the Dynamics Power Apps, right? The community is going to be in Houston in October.
Oh, nice.
NDC Oslo is going to be live again. That'll be in December in Oslo, Norway.
Oh, that sounds delightful.
If you didn't get enough snow, right, or you're afraid you're not going to get
right.
enough, right, then you can get on over there. Okay, very, very good. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for that. So we have a couple of those books. We have a couple of the links that we're going to put up on the show notes for today's episode at SQLDataPartners.com/PowerBI or at SQLDataPartners.com/225. Now, probably shouldn't. Okay. So for those who have stuck to the bitter end, one of the things we will be rolling out. So if you are a email subscriber to the podcast, this week you're going to get an email about a backup report. I wouldn't call it a visualization because it's in reporting services, right? This is not. It's it's a list. But you're going to get an email about that. We've put together one. Again, this is the one you can run in Management Studio, right? It's for one instance and one instance only. But we're looking for some feedback there. Believe it or not, right? Again, not you, compañeros, but believe it or not, there are lots of folks out there. We keep getting approached way more often than we would like from folks that think they have backups and don't, and now need them and don't have them. And so I know it sounds fairly basic, but we've created this report that people can use and just let them know, hey, I have a backup or I don't, right? And where it is. So that's going to be coming out this week. We're going to invite you to kick the tires on it. Let us know if we missed something or if you have a unique situation. We look forward to getting that out and getting a little bit of feedback. So, and we know that you enjoyed reaching out to us on social media. So if they wanted to do that, Mr. Eugene, how could they reach out to you?
Yeah, you can find me on SQLgene.com and at SQLgene on Twitter.
And Mr. Kevin?
You could find my information, but it was blanked out by the green screen.
Yeah, man, so close. And compañeros, as always, we solicit your feedback. Let us know what you're thinking. For those who are participating in our live stream, thank you. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm at Carlos El Chacon. Thanks for tuning in. And we hope to see you on the SQL Trail. Thanks, y'all.
SQL Data Partners.